Yes, we are. We come to you. Do not be alarmed. Your computer is now speaking. So we control the horizontal. We control
I'm
the vertical,
suddenly
which
alarmed, Rob.
and you are suddenly alarmed as you should be. So hello, everybody. Hello. Welcome to episode Hex 16 of the runZero Hour. Which Hex 16, that is ASCII code synchronous idle. We're getting into the obscure ones now.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So I am Rob King, and I am joined here by Todd Beardsley, who I called Ted for the first like 7 years, and he was too polite to correct me. But uh, and
This is the first
and
time I'm hearing this.
and and my good friend Ali Sheikh, which I'm kind of pronouncing correctly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is
So
correct. Yeah.
perfect, excellent,
You nailed it.
perfect. And Ali, nous devons parler rien de français pendant tout ce webcast, oui?
Très bien. Parfait.
Très
That's
bien.
I
Oui,
I prepared
parfait.
to do the whole
Allez.
thing in
Anglais,
French.
anglais tout le monde. Oui.
This will make a
Yep.
lot more sense at the end of the show.
Yes, right. That's the Ali and I are the only French speakers at runZero, and I say really Ali's the only French
Sorry.
speaker.
Right.
I
Yeah.
barely speak French, but
Rob has
this is
many gifts, including the language of protocols, but also a language of French and English, among others.
why thank you, Ali. But this is the educational content we strive to bring you. Come in next month and you can hear me count to 100 in Mandarin or something. It'll be great. So anyway, we have a very exciting episode today. We Ali is going to lead us off with a super great demo of some of the new features in runZero, especially around the threat modeling, threat detection, and remote critical vulnerability detection. So, next slide, please. It's demo time with Ali. This is a little segment we like to call demo time with Ali.
Yes, a recurring segment.
Yes, a regular.
Love it. Thank you. All right, let me move on to the screen here, and then hopefully you guys can all see the runZero console. So yeah, really super excited to be here. Thank you, Rob and Todd, for the invitation. And we released a couple of product improvements recently around exposure detection and vulnerability detection. And I wanted to take the chance today to essentially show you some of those and also some of the early feedback we've received from our customers. Just a sneak peek, some of the things I'll be showing includes, vulnerability enrichments that we added to the product, some proactive rapid response notification that I'm personally super excited for our customers to try, and additional stuff as well. And it's very important to reiterate to the listeners and people that are watching the recording that everything I'll be showing here today is not just for IT assets. This also includes additional device types in your attack surface, so that's OT and IoT. And keep that in mind as we're going through the demo today. And once you have kind of that in-depth visibility in runZero, we highlight where you have exposures and vulnerabilities that are not necessarily CVE based, as we'll show a few examples, and they're typically missing from your existing security platform. What you see on the screen here, this is runZero's risk management, and it aggregates and consolidates data that runZero collects about your attack surface using our 3-solution approaches. So we have an unauthenticated active scanner that is not an agent, doesn't require credentials. We have passive traffic sampling and an API integration. So once we have all of that info, we are bubbling up essentially the exposures that you should be concerned about and answering the question of what should I prioritize in my environment once runZero has discovered everything. And the first aspect of the risk management that I wanted to show here is on the top left, there is a widget called latest rapid response. That is for listeners that are not familiar with the runZero's rapid response approach, even though Rob, Todd, this is what you guys talk about pretty much on every runZero hour.
Stay for the end. We're going to have the rapid response roundup. It's going to be awesome.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah. But a quick summary. So we highlight emerging threats or zero-day vulnerabilities or high-risk misconfigurations that are top of the mind in the industry, and whether you have any assets impacted by that rapid response. So essentially, you wake up in the morning, you grab your cup of coffee, and the first order of business is, am I impacted by this thing that is all over the news? And it's very important to point that at that moment when the rapid response or the 0-day vulnerability or emerging threats comes out, there is no fix, there is no patch, there is no resolution yet. So the important thing to understand is whether you have any asset, software, service, whatever it is, a component that you have in the environment or not. And immediate response is very, very important here. Time is of the essence. And with the rapid response, there is no manual searches involved. There is no need to rescan, and there are no signatures that needs to be downloaded and rescanned with the environment because we already have the data, pretty much. So the other thing that we just released that I'm super excited about in terms of notification is the rapid response email notification. And I have an example here, which is for Microsoft SharePoint Server, which I know has been top of mind with a lot of our listeners, still has a big impact until now. And the rapid response email notification essentially tells you, hey, there is this 0-day or emerging threat, and we found a couple of assets impacted by it. So you have some preliminary information about what it is, how many assets do you have impacted, which ones they are, so you can click on that and essentially takes you to the runZero console. But the other thing is having the rapid response email, which Rob, Todd, and team releases for every single rapid response. And it goes into so much more in-depth details. And let me zoom in so the listeners can kind of see it more clear. And very, very important information about that rapid response, any workarounds available, what's the impact, and the relevant query, which is the same thing that you see also in the email that you can click in there. The neat thing is the rapid responses, you can go back to the blog post and it shows you all of the things that the team has released over time, including other emerging threats that happened recently, including the most recent one. So this allows you to have a proactive approach with the rapid response and without having to log into the runZero console, without having to do any rescan, you have the information there at your fingertips. And again, time is of the essence with these things. So being able to get to that information as quickly as possible.
Yep. It's something fun to point out there is when we say rapid, we really do try to make it as rapid as possible. We endeavor to get a rapid response out with basically same day of a disclosure, even if, and a forward-looking statement, lawyer, blah blah blah, even even if we can't directly identify the vulnerability immediately, we will do a tech detection and just be like, hey, you might want to go check this out. This could be something worth looking into to make sure you're safe. But then we will re-release queries and re-release rapid responses to say, okay, no, we can really detect this now, and here's how we do it, and all that. And you can also look at the blog, and we talk about how we do it. It's pretty fun. I like doing that sort of thing. Sorry. Anyway, please continue.
No problem. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong again, Robin Tubb, but the issue we've heard a lot of customers deal with when they don't have something like a rapid response is their traditional existing tools, when something comes out like the Microsoft SharePoint server, they have to wait for a signature to be created for, that traditional vulnerability management. And then they have to download the signature, rescan the environment with that signature. And depending on how big that environment is, it could take, days or even weeks. And in the meantime, you're fully exposed. Like that thing is still running in your environment, and you have no way of confirming whether you have any components that are running that. So
it's even worse than that, Ali. So if you're depending on like legacy vulnerability management that uses like an authenticated scan, right, for example, or endpoint detection and response, dollars to donuts say, which is such a weird term. Like a donut is definitely worth more than $1. But smart money is on like these tend to be things like checking to see if the patch is installed, right? So it's not the kind of thing that you can just like, even if you were able to like bottle up your scans and like go query them later or whatever, it wouldn't show up, right? Because it depends on the presence of the patch or like a entry in the Windows registry or something like that, right? Whereas because we do these rapid responses rapidly, it's in the name. It is at the very minimum, it's a tech detection that you don't have to go rescan your network. You already have it, right? You already have the bits and bobs in the database. The rapid response merely exposes the query to you, and so you can know in minutes, basically from release. So if you're getting these emails now or in the future and you want to know what to do with them, this is what you do with them. You zoom over to your console and
you rapidly respond.
You
yes,
should respond el rapido. I don't speak French.
Close enough.
Yes.
But you bring up a good point, Todd, because runZero's approach with rapid response and in general about finding exposures and attack surface discovery is that we don't rely on authentication. We don't rely on agents. So everything we're showing here are even exposures that are impacting unmanaged devices, which is, security's Achilles heel. Specifically devices like, OT or IoT, which unfortunately a lot of traditional tools struggle with identifying, but also finding exposures impacting them. That's a good point. Alrighty, so let's continue. The rest of the risk management dashboard here, you'll find, the keyword findings here. There's a finding overview and there are top findings. And this is aggregating essentially all of the instances that are affected by exposures. And we categorize them in different ways. So you'll find categories such as vulnerability, open access, and this allows you to track and understand changes that are happening over time, and also being able to pivot into a specific attack surface. For example, you can say, I want to focus and see risk management for my external attack surface versus internal, which runZero does, by the way. We do an external attack surface. So the rapid response could also be externally facing asset. And each finding represents a risk that attackers are actually targeting. So those are all going to be the low-hanging fruit that have real operational impact, remotely discoverable, because attackers don't care about CVE. They're looking for any weaknesses they can find.
All right. I know of no attackers that look at the daily stream of CVE as a target feed.
Gonna attack that.
Yeah. Right. Well, and I even saw somebody made a comment today where they were talking about how, this is low-hanging fruit and these aren't sophisticated attackers, as if that mitigates the fact that you're still getting attacked, right? It doesn't matter if it's not, quote unquote, sophisticated.
Advanced persistent teens are definitely my threat model.
Exactly.
All right, so the findings here that I'm showing, these are exposures that are happening. And a quick note, again, we've been talking about how we're doing a different approach to exposure management, because I think it's pretty important for us to call out some of the deficiencies that exist in current traditional security tools, where they rely on looking at vulnerabilities. For example, you have a list. Here is a list of older software running in your environment. Go patch them without any context. So it's very important to be able to understand, hey, what is the foundational level of visibility? How many assets do I have? What is the attack surface looks like? And the different approach that we're taking is showing you a list of variety of exposures. So those will be things like outliers, weak configurations, misconfigurations, or even hidden security gaps that, again, like I said, remotely discoverable attackers go after. And this is powered by runZero's own query-based exposure detection, but we're also consolidating data from third-party tools, and we'll talk about that in more details. You'll find a wide range of exposures, things like internet exposure that I'm showing here. By the way, I can also rank this by risk if you want to prioritize that. But things like assets, internal assets that are mistakenly exposed to the internet. There's this example here of publicly exposed OT service. This is a very, very common iteration with a lot of our customers.
And anybody who saw Todd and me talking
last week,
yeah, there's an immense number of these OT devices on the public internet, way more than there should be. It's a little scary. So.
And another exposure detection that we recently added to runZero is finding services, and specifically HTTP services, that are using default credentials. And here is kind of the open access. And if I click on that finding, it takes me to a more detailed page showing you all the instances. So we recently started collaborating with the folks at Nuclei, which I know, Rob, Todd, you guys had on a previous runZero hour. And we are using an embedded version of the Nuclei phone scanner to detect various exposures, such as vulnerabilities, misconfiguration, and an important note here on safety and speed of using the embedded nuclei scanner. The runZero research team, which is pretty much the folks on the call here, Rob, Todd, and their team, they've spent an immense amount of time analyzing the nuclei code base and inspecting different ways to leverage the nuclei stuff very safely and not incur additional time to discover, inventory, fingerprint those exposure and vulnerabilities. And the first thing to note here is when a runZero scanner goes and scans an asset or services and fingerprints them accurately, we are only going to run the relevant nuclei template if we're able to fingerprint that service accurately. In the instance, for whatever reason, we're not able to fingerprint a service, we are not going to run the nuclei checks. And this eliminates, obviously, the negative impact of blankly running all the nuclei checks on every system all the time, especially the ones that are fragile, like OT, ICS, IoT, etc. And the example I'm showing here, this is the Crush FTP file server, and we're showing both instances where we found the default credentials running, but also anonymous login being enabled on it. So really neat, and actually there's kind of a customer feedback that I'll talk about in a second here regarding the default credentials that we found. We're also tracking CVE-based vulnerabilities because, again, that's an important part. So you'll notice here all the vulnerability categories, the KEV, RCEs, etc. And those are vulnerabilities that are either discovered by runZero's own based query vulnerability research, but also vulnerabilities we pulled in from third-party platforms. So you see here the example in the source column. These are things that runZero has discovered. And these are going to be, vulnerabilities brought in from third party like CrowdStrike, but we also integrate with things like Tenable, Qualys, the typical vulnerability management platform that exists. And as part of our expanded scope working with Nuclei folks, we've added the ability to check for remotely exploitable critical vulnerability. And there is a few examples that I have here, actually, this Crush FTP, and this is how you can tell, how it was discovered. And this is the other improvement in the product that I was going to touch on, which is enrichment when it comes to vulnerability data. And this is something I'm super, super excited about. So we're leveraging multiple sources of information to provide deeper context into vulnerabilities. So we're integrating with, SysAKEV, vuln EPSS, but other sources of information as well. And it gives you additional context on the impact of the vulnerability, description, as well as remediation in details. And I was going to go through very quickly here, just show a high level of the vulnerability enrichment that runZero supports now. Of course, the big one, giving you a score. What's the vulnerability CVSS score? What's the exploitability status? And Rob, Todd, feel free to jump in and interrupt me if you guys have any additional color.
Is 10 bad? It's bright red, so I'm assuming that 10 is bad.
So I did write a paper on vulnerability scoring systems not too long ago.
That's right. That's right.
I have a feature request about this.
Yes, but 10 is bad.
10 is bad. 10 is the worst possible in CVSS. It's also extremely difficult to get to, and most of them are mislabeled. I'll say that.
What is it? What's
not
the
by runZero. It's mislabeled by CVSS. The way to get to 10, there's two ways to get to 10. And the more common way is you have high confidentiality impact, high integrity impact, and high availability impact. It is very difficult to technically, and I'm definitely being that guy, to have a high availability impact, which tends to mean like packet of death, or I can overflow your state table or something like that, and also have remote code execution like at the same time. It's very difficult to be that way. Now, if you have remote code execution, you can log into the thing, do RMRF, but that's more payload than exploit, and this is an area that literally nobody cares about except for me.
I care, Todd.
I know you care. And I know you care too, Ali, but I care an inordinate amount.
And we'll also show some of the details that Todd is talking about some of the other kind of metrics that comes
The
with
vector business
BSS and
here
stuff.
is the important bit, like privileges required, attack vector,
Yeah.
all of that. That is
Agreed.
important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
that's why it's
always
top.
fun. So Todd, do you want to give a brief explanation? Give me the elevator explanation of the difference between attack vector network and attack vector adjacent.
Oh gosh. Yes, I will give you that.
Because they're both
okay.
network.
Yes, they're both network. So attack vector network typically means you talk TCP/IP and you're talking the IP part of IP, is specifically internet. So it generally means can be exposed to the internet / often is exposed to the internet. Whereas adjacent tends to be things like, and you don't see very many of these, except for people who are trying to jiggle the numbers. Adjacent tends to mean only like locally routable on the one hand. So things like DHCP, ARP, things like that don't like cross, switch borders basically. Or alternatively, Wi-Fi, so radio. And so you're limited to the hundreds of meters around the device that can talk the thing. Those are the two things that typically mean adjacent. Some I'm going to say vendors, occasionally researchers, but some vendors will say like, oh, well, it's adjacent only because, no one's going to put this on the internet. See giant scan of OT devices exposed to the internet for the counterexample. But that is typically where you'll see a lot of the, putting your thumb on the scale of risk severity if you want the risk to be lower.
Interesting.
Thanks
for that insight.
We keep
this is very
insightful.
So yeah, that's why this is a top of the page when it comes to vuln enrichment. By the way, this is being propagated across all vulnerabilities, either discovered by runZero or imported by third-party vuln management. So it's very important for people that are looking at vulnerabilities every day, being able to have that level of insight and details. I think it's pretty important. Going down the list of additional enrichment, this is going to be essentially how did we find that vulnerability or using the Nuclei engine, what was the response, how it was discovered, and remediation steps, very detailed remediation steps.
And all of this is amazing, right? Like there are many security products out there that just say like, oh, we found this thing and don't tell you anything about the story, right? And it's like, oh, I found this. And so like, and then inevitably you'll have some analyst who has to look at this console every day and say like, oh, we found 20 of these things. And then somebody will come along, somebody like Rob, and say, well, how do you know you found it though?
Yeah.
With runZero, you can say like, here,
yes.
look, words and status codes and what all. Like, I can tell you exactly why this hit. For the rare occasion you have a false positive, you have that, right? And so you can say like, oh, I can see why you thought this was that, but it's actually this, right? And so it's like kind of a built-in sanity check for us and a way to explain to your boss why you can trust the finding.
Right. Yeah. The transparency of it, I think, is very important. That's a good point.
And it's top of line. It's like above the fold, right? Like it's there. You don't have to go digging for it.
No, absolutely not. And also talking about the data fidelity and accuracy of it, like this is another context that I think, correct me, you guys are more knowledgeable than me in vulnerability management, but like being able to very accurately understand what is the asset impacted by that vulnerability. So no more generic Linux, generic Apple device. We're telling you what it is very, very accurately. So this level of details is pretty important. And then going down the list, like this is additional vulnerability intelligence. I like the fact that we're showing known exploitation in the source of it too, and how it was exploited.
It's super fun.
And the additional details that we're collecting either from the third party or runZero's integration with other sources, the description of what the vulnerability is, a much more detailed remediation. And then the EPSS that we talked about, SysAkev, vuln check. And then going down the list, this is, I think, gold to a lot of vulnerability researchers. Like being able to look at every single attribute impacting the vulnerability and also doing queries on them. So every single attribute that you're seeing here that has a magnifying glass, you can essentially hit that, and it's going to create a query looking for any vulnerability that has that same specific data set or data point. I think is pretty powerful and pretty cool. And then finally, those are going to be references. In this case, it will tell us the Nuclei templates that we used to find that vulnerability, and then additional online references impacting that specific CVE. So again, a lot of data points that are very, very useful.
And I gotta say, and I want to make sure everybody. It sounds cheesy, but I love our UI. I love our design.
Yeah,
I think it's beautiful. I just love it. So.
Yeah, I agreed. And it's very neat that we're working with the folks of Nuclei on kind of expanding the checks there, because obviously it's open source, but it also is community driven. So you have more and more.
Source goes both ways.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
So being able to take advantage of that wider contribution, I think is pretty amazing. Yeah.
Yep. And I also I want to point out just real fast, we do pay it forward, except it's back. We pay it back. We pay it. There's reciprocity. We've contributed templates to Nuclei. We've contributed significant amounts of code to Nuclei. So we definitely want to be good open source citizens.
Yeah, absolutely agreed. We love open source.
We do.
All right, so I'm gonna wrap this up quickly. Before I do that, I just wanted to mention a quick win with one of our large customers that have leveraged some of the Nuclei integration that we have. So this is a very large customer that is a multinational energy company, and they've leveraged the default credential checks in their US subsidiary, and they immediately found upwards of 50 services that were running default credentials they did not know about. Luckily, many of those were either in a lab or highly segmented off, so the impact wasn't as tremendous. But during the research, they also found a couple of Dell iDRAC devices that were running default cracks, and that obviously gives remote access to the network. That obviously was a big exposure, and the security team decided to roll out the additional exposure detection, including default credentials, across all of their sites, not just the US. So it was safe, but it also had some insights on exposures they did not know about. Again, not CVE based, that runZero was able to help with. Yeah. Alrighty. So that is all of what I was going to show today. And just a quick information, the runZero platform is available for free if you start a trial today for 21 days. And it gives you full capabilities with everything that we've shown today and more. And after the 21 days, it turns into a community edition that is free for life, up to 100 devices and on a limited functionality. But I do love the fact that you can just run this at home, and you'll be surprised by the stuff.
It's super fun to run at home, especially when you have
really
advanced persistent teams in your house.
My kids got home from school one day and they were like, the TV's not working. I was like, no, I took it off of the Wi-Fi because I'm plugging, because I'm actually analyzing the UPnP responses from the TV. And they were like, Dad, we don't stop ruining TV for nerd reasons. And it's like, no, this is exactly what I want to do with my TV.
I wouldn't expect anything less, Rob. Yeah.
Thank you, Ali. Ali, this was fantastic. Thank you so much. Always a joy.
Yeah. Thank you, guys.
I'm going to take over the screen share. Let's see if I do this correctly. So, because I always start the share before the webcast. So, can y'all see my screen? Excellent.
Nailed it. Yes.
Wonderful. I can click 2 buttons in a row correctly. This is
wow.
This might be a first for me. So everyone, yes, thank you so much, Ali, for explaining that. And we had a question earlier. Oh yes, the Home Explorer binary is still named Rumble. That's right. We used to be called Rumble in the before times. So we had a question earlier, and I want to read it out loud. Akeem asked, hi, I'm Akeem from Nigeria, where OT adoption is growing fast, but cybersecurity adoption is still early. My question is, the combination of runZero's fingerprinting and the Nuclei engine sounds really powerful. It is. However, in OT networks where device misidentification could have safety implications, how do you ensure accuracy without introducing false positives that might alarm operators? Great question. Love it. And so we're going to kind of address this with some of these slides. So first off, I want to talk about how this feature is presented in the user interface. So you can see here at the top, we have the additional security tests, which are identify critical remote vulnerabilities, identify web-based control panels, and identify default logins in web-based control panels. So we tried really hard, and one of the things that I love about runZero is we try super hard to be safe by default. We make it a point of not sending invalid traffic in any protocol. We make it a point of not trying to overwhelm, not trying to be as fast as possible and overwhelm things. We even go so far as to manage how many connections we have to given subnets so that we don't overwhelm the state tables of intermediate devices, which is something that a lot of vendors don't take into account. So I spend many a night thinking how can we be as safe as possible. So all that is to say is we don't have tons of tuning knobs for this. You can turn it on, and if it's turned on, it should be generally safe in your environment. Now, obviously, nothing is 100%. Please do test, but in general, should be safe. So this shows the configuration at the top, and then at the bottom, this shows a clip from our documentation where we have an automatically updated list of the templates that are available and which of these checkboxes will enable them, right? So you can see, oh, okay, if I click this, this checkbox, what am I actually sending on my network? Potentially, we don't, as Ali mentioned earlier, and as I'll cover shortly, it's not always 100%. It's because we don't send everything. So let's talk a little bit about what actually is, when we say nuclei template, what is a nuclei template? So this is a very short example of a nuclei template. To answer, there was a question that just came up. Let's say we run a trial but lose our budget and have to discontinue use. How do we delete our data? Just send a message to support@runzero.com. We are happy to, it's a 5-minute operation. We're happy to do it. So this is an example of a authentication bypass vulnerability expressed as a nuclei template. So, and this is a fun one too, because you'll notice that the authentication bypass is due to the casing in the URL. There was a vulnerability in FlowWise prior to 1.65 that authentication was checked for API/v1, but only in the lowercase version, and they don't normalize casing when you send the request. So you can send API v1 in uppercase, and it just lets you access anything. Super, super fun. So a nuclei template is ultimately expressed as a collection of actions to do, and then matchers to see if the response comes back. And if it does come back and it does match the response, then it is, bad, or it's the vulnerability or whatever you're trying to detect. So this says, oh, I'm going to do a get, HTTP get, and I'm going to do it to this path. And if the response that comes back has credential name and updated date in it, then this template as a whole is said to have matched. So this is a sample template. It's great. But you'll notice this magic here of runZero match. So when people scan networks, they'll often send every possible test. A lot of products will send thousands of probes and tests and just throw the kitchen sink at an asset.
Bandwidth is free, Rob. Just do it. Just
exactly right. Bandwidth doesn't cost anything. Devices are happy with random traffic hitting them in from every direction. So lots of fun. So what we do is we try to limit it. We won't ever send, and this kind of ties into our whole philosophy of we don't send invalid traffic. We don't send unexpected traffic. Now, that's not saying that we don't send, some traffic to devices. We have to. That's the whole concept of active fingerprinting. Mm-hmm. But we try very hard to only send things that will match, have even a good chance of matching. Oh, and by the way, all of our templates are open source. You can go to GitHub, runZero Inc., Nuclei Templates repo, go check it out. It's a fork of the upstream project discovery repo. We regularly do synchronizations back and forth. So it's, but it has our augmentations in there. You're free to go see it. And as Ali showed in the vulnerability info, there's even a link to the template. So if it matched a nuclei template, you can click on it, it'll take you, you can see the source, nothing to hide, pay all the attention to the man behind the curtain. It's fine. So here is a little bit of a zoom in on that runZero match. So one of the things that we do, that we've augmented our nuclei test to do, is we will only run templates that match a device that we have fingerprinted, right? So this is all lovingly handcrafted by people, and we say, okay, this template is, we analyze the template to see if it's safe, right? Like, we're not going to use something that even if it were to hit, even if it would only hit and match one single device, it could still cause a problem, then that template is not going to be included. So we limit ourselves to only the templates that we consider to be safe, and then we further narrow it down per device, and actually even per service, which template could even possibly match, so that we're not sending 1,000 requests to every service, right? We're not sending we're not sending 40,000 HTTP requests to every service. That would be bad. So you can see here, this is for a specific one. We say we've already fingerprinted the asset. And we say, okay, we're only going to run this template if the hardware product is the adaptive security appliance. If it's not that, this template is completely ignored. There is 0 extra bytes on the wire. No traffic is sent. And the end. And then, as Ali mentioned earlier, this is, the end result of that, is we get this lovely full explanation. It's the difference between provenance and justification, right? So you have provenance in that it's from the Nuclei engine, and you have justification in that it actually says this is the proof that this vulnerability actually matched, which is always super duper helpful.
Yeah.
And in fact, it even goes so far, like, here's the Crush FTP default login credentials. It'll even tell you, here's the default login credentials.
I can't believe you're posting my password.
I know, I have the same password on my luggage. So I also I've been trying to figure out a joke about Crush FTP. Wait, what did FTP tell you? Is it me? But I just can't quite get it to work.
Oh yeah,
it's there, and it's like,
there's something there. There's something there.
There's something there, but next time, tune in next month. I'll have a great,
much more polished.
Exactly, much more polished Crush FTP thing. So Akeem, to go back to your question, this is how we limit this is one of the ways we limit the nuclei engine. We also, which nuclei scans and templates we run. So we limit them at runtime based on these predicates, these checks, and then we also ensure that we only run ones that have been vetted by a human. So we actually go and check each template and make sure that it is in fact okay to send to any device, right? Like, we're not going to do anything. We try really hard not to send anything that's going to cause permanent changes or damage or crashes or anything like that. You'll even note that with the default login checkbox in the UI, that's actually not checked by default, because with the default logins, if you send a lot of login requests and they fail, some devices will in fact lock out the account, and we don't want to do that. So, you have to intentionally say, I'm okay with potentially being locked out. In fact, Crush FTP, some versions of it will just block the entire IP, which is, always fun. And then to maybe delve a little bit more into the OT side, we also try really, really hard to only send valid OT traffic. And again, we are very careful to only send regulated amounts of traffic, not too much. And we'll even go so far as to say things like, oh, well, I saw information from this protocol on this device. I don't need to even query these other things because I already have as much information as I need, right? So to really try to limit the amount of traffic that we send to these sensitive devices. Looks like we have another question here. Hi all, Xavier from France. I hope you were in the beginning of the call, Xavier, where you heard my wonderful French. Or terrible French, just,
not guaranteed.
Yeah, wonderful was there. Yeah, exactly. So, still about false positive. Usually, vulnerability scanners are mainly checking for the presence of a vulnerability. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to summarize here a little bit. Yeah. I have an example in mind that I encountered on a Gen 2 system. With Gen 2 use flags, you can disable certain behaviors or modules like Apache. So even if the Apache version is known to have a particular vulnerability, it might not actually be affected because the vulnerable module wasn't compiled in. So my question, how do you handle this kind of scenario? Do you go beyond simply checking the presence of the vuln? Potentially you exploit to verify. So yeah, I summarized a little bit, Todd. It was, it was like 80%, right? So
you have a
it
poor
depends on a
compression
case.
algorithm in your mouth.
Right, exactly. So we try it's going to be on a case by case basis. There are several vulnerability checks, and when I say several, many vulnerability checks that if the exploitation, quote unquote, does not cause damage, harm, or permanent changes to the system, then oftentimes they will actually do an exploitation. Because if, for example, if it's a command injection vulnerability, it and the output would be reflected back to the scanner, then a lot of the checks will be like, echo this random string back. And if we see that random string in the response, then we know it worked, right? Then we know it's actually exploitable. But some of them are purely version checks if the check can't be done safely. And then if there is no way to check the version and no way to check the exploitability safely, then we generally won't run that as a exploit check. There may be a runZero query that will report a vulnerable version if we can get the version in another way, but we won't generally we as a policy, we will not run a vulnerability check if it's going to cause permanent changes, damage, or anything like that. But if we can get a proof of exploitability safely, then we often do. So again, that was probably a longer answer. Thanks for the answer, very clear. At least one person thought it was clear. That's good. Glad to know. Okay, so that explains how we do vulnerability checks safely, which is always fun. And then one minor other thing, Nuclei has a wonderful collection of signatures to do technology detection. So if you want to detect things on your network and what software you've got and things like that, we can use this to augment the software detection that we have in runZero. So you can see here, this was just a sample device in my home lab, and like all right-thinking people, I use Python for all of my work because it's just so much better than things like Ruby. But
you can't bait me, Rob.
So you can see here that this tech detect subsystem, in fact, did detect that I was running Python and simple HTTP. Simple HTTP being the Python embedded HTTP server that comes by default to the Python standard library because its battery's included. So it's a great language, Todd. So with that, and everyone, Ruby for life. So with that, we're going to move on to our rapid response roundup. But everyone, please keep tossing questions in the chat. We love answering questions. I
was going to say, Rob, can I say something really quick? I really enjoy the transparency that we have at runZero with how we do things. A lot of times when I'm working with new prospects, they always ask like, hey, can you go into more details? And then they say the caveat of, we understand if you say this is magic or voodoo or something that you can share. And that's very common with a lot of vendors, is they basically don't give you the level of visibility and details and transparency that we are doing. And I really enjoy that about runZero. So
yeah, we really do. I mean, obviously there's not, there's some things that are, industry trade secret, whatever, but we try really hard to be as transparent as possible. I mean, I can't, keep a secret to save my life, obviously. So if they're trusting me, then, here we go. So, all right. So rapid response roundup. This is, as Ali was talking about earlier, we have the rapid response system. And every month we like to talk a little bit about our favorite rapid responses from the past month-ish. So let's take it away.
Yes.
Todd, what do we have this month?
So, every rapid response is beautiful in its own way. These are possibly the more interesting ones, or at least more interesting to talk about. And so we're just gonna dump right into it, right? It's gonna be Plex, free PBX, and ArcServe unified data something or other. Is it called? I don't remember what it's called.
It's unified data protection.
Protection, yes.
Yeah,
Which is fancy way of saying backup.
Right.
All right, so moving on to Plex. So stop me if you've heard this one before. Um, a little while ago, and I believe it was right after our last Run Zero hour show. There was a bit of a kerfuffle around Plex. Um,
Hmm.
there was a bug, and it was reported, and they paid for it. It was part of some bug bounty thing that they run, which is great, good for them. And they released a patch, and they took the unusual but not entirely alien step for them of
Hmm.
emailing everybody who they believed were running the affected versions and saying like, "Hey, gang, you have to update this now." Like, and that put some heat on this vulnerability.
Hmm.
The problem was at the time, they said, "Hey, you have to update because there was a bug and we found it internally and don't worry about it, blah, blah, blah," which is, true and everything for, the purposes of this disclosure.
When a vendor emails me out of the blue and says not to worry, that's when I know not to worry.
That's when
That's how I know not to worry.
it says right in the email, don't worry about it.
Yeah, it says don't worry.
And that's the thing, right? Like that action, like good for them for being proactive. Like I don't want to say don't ever be proactive. That is not the lesson to take.
Right,
But
right.
the consternation came from the statements of, "Hey, there's a bug. We're not going to tell you anything about it, and maybe we'll get around to a CVE ID someday." That's cool, right? And to which I say, no, Plex, that is not cool. There is a small but growing faction, I think, of vulnerability researchers like myself, who believe quite strongly that when you release a patch for a security vulnerability and then withhold information about that security vulnerability, you're doing maybe not more harm than good, but maybe an equal level of harm and good. Because
Mm-hmm.
yes, you're getting a patch out, and yes, you're not like giving like the breadcrumbs to all the script kiddies and your casual criminals on the internet.
Right.
Um, but the fact is that the people who do this for a living, like actual real criminals, mafiosos and spies and all them, right? Like who care a lot about end day attacks, right? Which is a very popular kind of philosophy for
Mm.
getting access to other people's stuff. Is why bother researching, fresh new Ode that there's no patch for when I can just reverse a patch for something
Hmm.
that's new, knowing that like patch uptake takes a while, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
So I had made a comment earlier about how like I don't know of any attacker that looks at CVE as a target feed. But what they do look as for a target feed, what some look at for a target feed are patches. Because you don't get to patch things and also keep things secret from the very people you are trying to keep it secret from, right?
Right.
I think the population of folks in the world that are capable of reversing patches, right, through bin diffing or whatever technique you're using, is a very small population. And I believe it is, if it's not majority criminal actors and spies, it is at least a lot of them. I would be surprised if it was as even as 50-50 with defenders, right?
So I
Whereas
love how Todd has worked with many people who do this for fun, and he's like, I don't know, maybe they're criminals. I mean,
and so right, like I hang out with people who do this, right, who are not criminal. I can categorically state that they're not criminals, but are able to do this. These people do not work frontline IT. Frontline IT, usually CISOs, right, typically are not hanging around BinDiff and Binary Ninja and all that. Typically not. Sometimes you get lucky and you get one. Um, Journalists don't do this, academics don't do this. Like all of the people who are interested in defense don't do patch reversing to find out details of the bug. And I'm talking about details of the bug in a sense that like it must be like this is its own good, right?
yeah.
And that is not true either, right? Like the purpose of giving maybe not all details, right? I can totally see why you would not want to release full proof of concept with, your fresh vulnerability advisory for your product that you make. Um, But by telling people, giving some hints of like how to tell if you were attacked, or how to tell if like when like if you happen to be running network logs or running like user behavior analytics, which is like a cool tech, right? How to like what are the kinds of things you need to do in order to exploit this vulnerability. And we can go all the way back to the start of this webcast, like 5 minutes in, we were talking about like what does CVSS actually measure? All of this was absent, right, from the initial Plex disclosure. It did come out a few days later after some teeth pulling. Our pals at VaultCheck like stepped up and said, "All right, fine, we're going to do a CV on it. We don't know much about the vulnerability. We'll make some guesses, but we'll have a number on it so we can at least talk about it, right?" Which is the whole point of CVE IDs is that we can say this Plex vulnerability, not that Plex vulnerability. Anyway.
Yep.
This is all to say that there was a lot of vulnerability disclosure drama around this particular bug. Our pal here, Matthew, wrote up a very delightful query for this thing.
That's his face. You can see there.
And that's his face. It's a wonderful face. Face you can trust. And all of the, so we're still in the zone, by the way. We don't actually know what this, well, we as defenders don't know. If you have reversed the Plex patches, please let me know. I would love to know more about this vulnerability. I gave it a shot because after a couple days, I'm like, okay, well, how hard is it? Actually, turns out it's really hard. Like I picked like the 32-bit Linux build, and I like kicked it through BinDip, and I screwed around with it for like 2 hours in a row, and came up with like, it might have something to do with like meta tags on media files or something. But that's as far as I got. And I'm like, okay, this is actually really hard. And I'm not looking to, commit espionage with this thing. So who cares, right? This is purely just on my time. People who do espionage will do this. So all of that said, right? Like, I think that releasing silent patches that don't describe the vulnerabilities you're fixing is not as good as, it's not bad, but it's not as good as releasing some kind of indicators of compromise hints that people can use, right? Now, fast forward to a couple days ago. I want to say it was September 9th. So just a touch, maybe exactly a week ago, right? There was a breach at Plex, and Plex sent out another email saying, "Hey, gang, remember us, Plex? You should really change your password. Just FYI." Now, is it related to this bug? Can't tell. Don't know. Don't know what the vectors are. Don't know if it's, network or needs privs or whatever, right? There's some indication today on the CVE for this bug that privileges are required. Some kind of privilege level is required to exploit it, which is good news, right? It's not just like straight shot remote code execution or anything, unauthenticated remote code execution. But because we don't know anything about the original vulnerability back in August, I can't tell you much about this breach that's happening this week. So if you're a Plex user, please do change your password, and you're gonna want to schedule some time for this because it's a giant. Like, because you got to log out of literally everything that's ever logged into your Plex thing. You got to log out of like I use Plex, to watch archived copies of media that, of course, I bought, and I do it on my Xbox and the
Plexbox
clients. Thank you, Rob. The Plexbox client is amazing. I really like it. I really enjoy Plex, by the way. It is like the one server in my house that brings me the most joy.
How many servers do you have in your house, Don?
Not many anymore because I'm not a nerd like you, Rob. Hey, man, I used to run my own email. I used to run my own DNS. Back in my day, it was uphill both ways on the internet. So anyway, that's a story with Plex. If you haven't looked for Plex media servers in your environment, please take a look. There was a breach. By the way, the reason why I cared so much about Plex, not just because I run it, because there was a breach in 2022, I want to say, where some open source developer had a Plex server that shared a password with his GitHub account or something, and there was a supply chain poisoning due to and so we know that, and this was like international espionage type stuff. So we know that like nation state actors definitely are keeping an eye on Plex because it's such a tasty way into developer consoles. So
Yes.
that's your safety tip for the day. Boy, oh boy, I talked a lot about that. Let's
That's
move on
okay.
to the next one.
Weird flex, but okay. So
Weird Plex, but okay. Where were you
that's
on the blog, Rob?
all I'm saying is that that joke was probably not even
Golden.
funny like 4 years ago. So yeah, but anyway,
Golden.
all right. So, yes,
Thank
free
you.
PBX. Todd,
Perplexing from chat. Thank you so
there
much.
you go. That's better. Okay,
All
Todd,
right.
what is a PBX?
PBX is oh dang it, I knew you were going to put me on this. Phone back exchange is what that stands for.
Private branch exchange.
No, I was totally making it up. Private
Okay.
branch exchange. So we released this because, like I say, every rapid response is interesting and valuable in its own way. This one kind of bubbled to the top of my list of things that were interesting, mainly because it's phones. I got my start in this life of crime on telephones in the 80s. And I spent an inordinate amount of my youth exploring how telephone switching works, how telephone networks work. I thought it was amazing that you could talk to basically anyone on the planet with like just a little bit of money and almost no effort. And I wanted to get rid of the money part. So I definitely made illegal phone calls for free. As in the I was a minor. I was a juvenile. You can't get me on that now.
Right.
Um,
Exactly. Yep.
so free PBX is the most popular GUI, graphical user interface. I don't know what that stands for, Rob.
Oh, there you go.
GUI for Asterix, which is today far and away like the most popular PBX server on Earth. And you use these things to do voice over IP, which is kind of a funny way to say telephone, because all
Right.
phones are really doing packet switching now, especially the ones that are in your pocket. But Asterisk is super prevalent. Free PBX has a long open source lineage. Asterisk a long open source lineage, so like it's freaking everywhere.
Yep.
I don't know, like if you're doing on-site pen testing today and you don't have like something in your pocket for Asterisk, you're kind of doing it wrong because you
Yep.
will run into it. Like this is on the level of Windows on the desktop, Cisco on the router, and Asterisk on the phones, right? Like
Yep.
these are the targets to have. And so this is why this is something that you will want to pay attention to. Chances are good that you're running this if you have like an on-site office, like a coffee maker and somebody sitting at the front whose job is to sit at the front.
Yep. And answer the phone. The phone answering being the important part. Yes.
The phone answering, right, which is routed through
Yep.
all this. So do check your free PBX stuff. Moving on.
One thing to note on the free PBX,
Yes.
we did some research. Matthew did some research. Thank you, Matthew. And there are a lot of old installations of free PBX that are past their end of life dates, so they're not getting patches. You just so you know, you might be running an old version. So there's that.
And speaking of old software, let's talk about our friends at ArcServe. So I would say when I properly started my IT career at Westinghouse Electric, we don't just make things, we make them radioactive. We used Cheyenne ArcServe in 1996. And that's where this stuff comes from. This ArcServe traces a lineage from Cheyenne. It was delightful. It had like it's the coolest like robot arm based tape thing. Attackers really, really, really like attacking ArcServe. This is the place to be. If you're a criminal attacker, mostly ransomware flavored, so your mafioso types. Once you have initial access, you make a beeline for the backup system because that's what this all is. The UDP, like I said earlier, is a fancy way to say backups. Because if you're going to ransom somebody, you're going to want to make sure that they don't have any backups they can just restore from, because what's the fun in that for the ransomer? And so these are super hot targets. They're not great targets for like initial access usually, unless they're accidentally exposed to the internet. but they're great lateral targets for bad guys and for pen testers too, right? So keep an eye on your Arcserve stuff. This is also the kind of thing that just kind of runs forever and tends to slip through the cracks when it comes to patches. So if you're running this stuff, make sure you're up to date on your patches and you are actually backing up your backups.
Back up your backups, exactly. So, and with that, we want to take a second. So first off, before we let you go,
Sector. Talk about Sector. We got to talk about Sector.
Our illustrious fearless leader HD Moore is speaking at Sector in Toronto on the 1st or 2nd of October. So definitely come see him. I will also be speaking at Sector, and it's not a keynote, but nobody, I mean, who's counting, right? It's not a keynote. That's okay. It's just as good. It's just as good. But I will also be speaking. It's better in a way, really. But I will also be speaking at Sector, and I would love to see you there. I will be talking all about identifying white labeled devices and how to detect them on your network. So definitely come see us. And then also, we wanted to give a quick shout out to everybody who makes runZero Hour possible, because it is truly a cast of thousands. So we have all of this, within 2 orders of magnitude, it's a cast of thousands.
Sure.
So,
so it's a mighty fine error bars.
Yeah, exactly, right. So Alfredo Ledesma did all of this work on the slides. It is the reason the slides look good is entirely him.
It's because of Alfredo. Yes,
it's because of Alfredo. Yes,
Yeah,
and
100%.
then Kristen Davis does all of the management and finagling to make this webcast come together. So thank you all, everyone, for all this work. And all right, that was that. We will see you.
That's it. I think we did a show.
15th.
I think we did a runZero hour.
Yeah.
Yep.
So thank you, everyone. It was wonderful to see you there. So
Thank you.
bye, everybody.
Thanks all. Stay real, chat.
Bye.